You mentioned your religion. What religion exactly do you represent?
I'm a Santo. I do Palo. I'm a Santo.
What's that mean exactly?
All that sacrificing goats and all that shit, that's not just for that's just real life.
You sacrifice a goat?
I sacrifice goats, chickens, mice. I do shit for certain shit though. I'm not allowed to explain it how you want me to explain it. I think how you want me to explain it, but yeah,
Google.
You could Google it, but it ain't gonna explain. It's like
Yo, the rapper behind 2025's viral 6 to 7 Wave posted himself on Instagram holding 2 doves and a chicken. In the very next slide, those birds are dead. One of their hearts sitting on the floor next to a glass filled with blood. New Year's celebration. That's how he kicked off the year. And the internet? Yeah, it completely lost it while everyone else was popping bottles. Skrilla was doing something half his fan base couldn't even wrap their heads around. The same guy whose track took over TikTok, whose 67 line had kids repeating it everywhere. That same dude was casually posting what looked like ritual animal sacrifice on IG like it was just another Tuesday. And here's the wild part, he never tried to hide it. Not once, no cap. He's been open about this from day one. He speaks on it in interviews, threads. It through his music and posted on social media. This wasn't leaked, it wasn't exposed. Skrilla put it out there himself loud and clear, and still when the mainstream finally caught on, people acted like they had just uncovered some secret. Y'all gotta understand, this story is way bigger than just one rapper's beliefs. This is about a kid from one of the roughest zip codes in America, grew up in conditions that would break most people and built an entire spiritual system around surviving it. Then the world reacts to that system with fear, confusion, and straight up ignorance. Let me walk you through it from the start to really understand Skrilla. You gotta understand where he came from, because you can't separate his spirituality from his environment. They're connected, same roots, same soil. Jamil Edwards was born June 3rd, 1999, and raised in Kensington, a neighborhood in Philadelphia known for its open-air drug trade. If you don't know Kensington, let me paint it real quick. This is ground zero for America's opioid crisis, blocks where heroin and fentanyl move like water. People slumped on corners in broad daylight, kids growing up stepping over bodies on their way to school. This is an exaggeration. It's documented, photographed, reported worldwide. His mom is Mexican from Texas. His dad is African American from Philadelphia. That background matters, and we're circling back to it because it ties directly into the religion he practices. He's described his childhood as the best time of his life and said he started selling drugs around age 12 while most kids are stressing about middle school. He's already deep in the street economy of one of the most dangerous areas in the country. And here's what stands out. He calls it the best time, not the worst. That tells you everything about how he was wired early on. This wasn't victim mindset. This was adaptation, survival, becoming identity. He ended up catching multiple heroin-related charges and spent 2.5 years on house arrest during high school. Think about that ankle monitor, stuck inside watching life move outside the window while still a teenager. And here's where it shifts. Before music, he wanted to be a fashion designer. He was also involved in community activism. This isn't your typical one-lane street rapper story. This is a layered individual whose path kept getting redirected by his surroundings. Edwards got into rap after being inspired by his childhood friend, fellow Philly artist Rico Havoc. He recorded his first track, A Dog Food, as Skrilla then dropped his debut single, A Green Snake, in 2018. From 2018 to 2022. That's 4 years of independent grind. His mixtapes, A Cutthroat and A Gemini Season, dropped in 2022 and 2023, building his name step by step in a city already heavy with drill talent. And through all of that, the music, the streets, the cases, the house arrest, his spiritual practice was always there, because Santeria wasn't something he picked up later. It was something he was born into. Hold up, before we go further, we gotta break this down, because most of the backlash around Skrilla's beliefs comes from people not understanding what Santeria actually is. And let's be real, ignorance dressed as outrage is still ignorance. Santeria is an Afro-Caribbean religion that blends traditional Yoruba beliefs with Catholic elements. Here's what that means. Yoruba is one of the oldest and most complex spiritual systems in history, originating in West Africa, mainly Nigeria and Benin. When enslaved Africans were brought to places like Cuba, Puerto Rico, and Brazil, they were forced into Catholicism. So they adapted. They kept their original deities, the Orishas, but disguised them as Catholic saints. Yemaya, the ocean and motherhood goddess, became linked to the Virgin Mary. Ocean, tied to love, fertility, and fresh water, was associated with Our Lady of Charity. That's how the practice survived through strategy and resilience. This isn't devil worship. It's not Satanism. It's one of the most enduring spiritual systems in the African diaspora, one that survived slavery by outsmarting it, and it spread through Latin America and Caribbean communities in the U.S., which connects directly to Skrilla's Mexican roots on his mother's side. He practices Santeria, and it heavily influences his music tracks. Like the words from Asun and the words from Yemaya are direct references to these orishas. These aren't random symbols, they're deeply respected figures with centuries of meaning. Now animal sacrifices, part of Santeria rituals, were required, and yeah, this is where people start reacting, but let's keep it real. How many of those same people eat chicken every day without thinking twice? The difference is intention. One chicken dies in a factory for profit, the other in a ritual with spiritual meaning. But somehow the religious one is what shocks people. Keep that in mind. In Santeria, different animals have different purposes. Chickens are often used in cleansing rituals or for protection. Doves symbolize peace, purity, and wisdom. The belief is that these offerings connect practitioners with their deities. The blood is seen as nourishment for the orishas, while the meat is shared within the community. This is ancient. It's documented. It's practiced by millions today. But when a rapper from Kensington posted on Instagram in 2025, suddenly it's controversy, and here's where things really escalate. Skrilla's rise and his spiritual identity didn't happen separately, they grew together. And when the mainstream noticed both at the same time, that's when everything blew up. He signed to Priority Records in 2023 and dropped his first single with them. Booted to that same year, Priority Records. That's the label behind Ice Cube, NWA, Snoop Dogg. That's a serious cosign. The industry machine starts moving. His album Underworld dropped early 2024. Then as Zombie Love Kensington Paradise came. November 1st, 2024, November 1st. That's Day of the Dead, Dia de los Muertos. That date wasn't random, that was intentional. A cultural and spiritual statement tied directly to his beliefs and identity. The people who understood it, they got it instantly. The ones who didn't, that's when the discomfort started creeping in. But the real explosion came next. A snippet of his song, a Doot Doot 67, hit TikTok in September 2024 through an anonymous account by February 2025. It had been used in over 126 videos, 126. The 60-70 trend took over everything: schools, courts, social feeds, kids everywhere repeating it nonstop. And then, because this is how the internet moves, people start digging into who made the song, and what they uncover. Not what they expected at all. They find the animal sacrifice posts. They find the Santeria interviews. They find an artist who's been completely upfront about a religious practice that most of mainstream America doesn't understand at all. Skrilla, the creator of the virally 6 to 7 a trend, jumped on Instagram to show his New Year ritual animal sacrifice. The rapper is seen holding 2 doves and a chicken. In another photo, the birds are dead, and a heart from one of them sits on the floor next to a glass of blood, and the internet completely lost its mind. Here's where it gets real. Unlike a lot of artists who dodge questions about their beliefs or keep things vague for brand safety, Skrilla has been on record multiple times, speaking openly in interviews and podcasts. He's sat down and explained himself clearly, no filter. Skrilla has identified himself as Santero and mentioned practicing Palo, referring to Palo Mayom, another Afro-Caribbean spiritual tradition that also includes animal sacrifice. Being a born Santo, as he puts it, means this wasn't some aesthetic choice he picked up later. This is lineage, this is inheritance, something passed down through family. And Santeria, being born into it, means the orishas have already chosen you. Your spiritual path, your responsibilities, your connection to specific deities, it's all rooted from birth, not something you pick up because it's trendy. Palo Mayom adds another layer. While Santeria centers on the orishas, Palo works with ancestral spirits, forces of nature, and the dead, often through physical vessels called ngangas. It's darker in tone, more intense in practice, and definitely not something you casually step into. Palo is serious. It requires real initiation, real discipline, real knowledge, and the fact that Skrilla practices both, that tells you how deep this really goes. Now, does his music reflect all this? Absolutely. Listen closely to his sound. You can hear it. His lyrics touch on drug dealing and usage, but also reference Santeria and his Mexican roots. Even his album titles, Underworld, Zombie Love, Kensington Paradise, carry that energy. The production, critics called it eerie, and that's not by accident. That's an artist whose entire vision is filtered through a spiritual lens. Most listeners don't even have the words. For now, here's what really happened. Once the mainstream caught up, 2 completely opposite reactions showed up at the same time, and both say more about the audience than they do about Skrilla. This is where everything split into camps. Camp 1. The Christian outrage crowd the moment his religion hit the spotlight. A wave of religious content creators jumped in YouTube videos labeling his beliefs as demonic pastors reacting to his Instagram posts, commentators calling Santeria straight-up devil worship. The content came fast and heavy, and here's the real reason why Santeria, Palo, and similar Afro-Caribbean traditions have been demonized by Western Christianity for centuries. The same systems that enslaved African people also labeled their spiritual practices as evil to justify erasing. That narrative never fully disappeared, so when a mainstream rapper openly practices these traditions, some communities react with that same inherited fear and judgment. What people find controversial about Skrilla isn't really Skrilla. It's unresolved history, cultural baggage that's never been fully unpacked. Camp 2. The fans who rock no matter what. On the flip side, you've got fans who either understand it or just don't care and still love the music. The 6'7" kids weren't about to drop the trend just because their favorite artist sacrifices chickens. Philly supporters who've watched his journey see the religion as part of his authenticity, and then there are listeners from Afro-Caribbean and Latino backgrounds who actually practice similar traditions and felt seen for the first time in mainstream hip-hop in late February 2025. Kyle Pagan from Crossing Broad even called Skrilla the hottest rapper in Philadelphia, and the controversy, it didn't slow him down. If anything, it boosted him. That's what outrage culture always misses. When controversy comes from real authenticity, it often strengthens a fan base instead of breaking it. People can tell the difference between an act and the real thing, and Skrilla, he's clearly the real thing. Hip-hop has always had a complicated relationship with spirituality, from 5% Nation influence in New York rap to Nation of Islam ties to gospel crossovers to Rastafarian energy and reggaeton-adjacent sounds. The culture has never been one note spiritually, but there's always been a comfort zone. Some beliefs get embraced, others get treated like threats. What Skrilla represents is an Afro-Caribbean tradition that's deeply rooted in African heritage and visually intense to mainstream audiences. Animal sacrifice imagery, references to working with spirits, Orisha names and songs. This doesn't fit into the pray to God lane that gets applause at awards, shows it doesn't align with what corporate brands feel safe promoting. So now the culture is facing a real question, whether it says it out loud or not, whose spirituality gets accepted, whose beliefs are respected as culture, and whose get labeled demonic. Because the same people panicking over Skrilla's rituals never question artists praying to Jesus on stage. Both are sincere, but only one gets a pass, and that difference, it's not random. It reflects which traditions come from Europe and which come from Africa, and it goes even deeper than that. This isn't new to hip-hop or any art form shaped by black and brown creators. Jazz was once labeled immoral, blues was called the devil's music, rock and roll got condemned. Second, white teens started embracing its same pattern every time. Take cultural expression, call it dangerous, then later celebrate a watered-down version. Once it's been cleaned up for mainstream comfort, Santeria in hip-hop, just the latest version of that story, and the people making outrage content about Skrilla are, whether they realize it or not, continuing a cycle that's been around for centuries. That's not an opinion, that's history. Now zoom into the hip-hop community itself, because the reaction inside the culture is way more layered than the outside noise. A lot of black and Latino listeners come from backgrounds where Santeria, Candomblé, Voodoo, and similar traditions aren't unfamiliar. These are family traditions, grandparents. Beliefs, cultural roots from Cuba, Puerto Rico, Haiti, Brazil, West Africa for them. Skrilla isn't shocking, he's relatable. He's one of the first mainstream artists reflecting something they've always kept private, because they learned early it wasn't safe to show publicly. That's a huge audience. The fall industry is overlooked for years, and Skrilla is connecting with them not as a strategy, but just by being himself. But let's keep it real. Even within those communities, not everyone agrees with how he's presenting it. There are practitioners, elders, and initiated members who feel some of these rituals are meant to stay private. In traditional Santeria, many ceremonies aren't for public display, so the debate isn't just, is this demonic? That's ignorance. The real question is, how do sacred traditions exist in a social media world? How do you respect something rooted in privacy when fame demands visibility? That's the tension Skrilla is navigating in real time in front of millions, and whether intentionally or not, he's forcing that conversation into mainstream hip-hop like never before. Now take a step back. Jamil Edwards grew up in Kensington, one of the most documented centers of poverty and the opioid crisis in America. Started selling drugs at 12, caught heroin charges. As a teen, spent 2.5 years on house arrest by every system metric. He wasn't supposed to make it. But he did not by changing who he was, not by cleaning up his story, not by hiding his beliefs. He made it by staying fully, unapologetically himself. Kensington, Santeria, Palo, the streets, the reality, all of it unfiltered, and the culture responded. A Doot Doot 67 blew up on TikTok in 2025, launching the 67 trend, 126 zero videos, major label deals, sold out shows, collaborations, a loyal fan base, and the religious controversy. It's not stopping anything because the people outraged were never his core audience, and the people who are, they recognize something real even if they can't fully explain it. What they're recognizing is authenticity, the rarest thing in an industry built on image. An artist who never asked for permission to be himself, who put his beliefs into his music, his visuals, his interviews, and let the culture react however it wanted. But let's talk about the cost, because authenticity isn't free. Every time Skrilla posts a ritual, he's giving up certain opportunities, brand deals. He'll never get radio stations that won't touch his music. Parents who hear his 67 and Google him and shut it down instantly. Those are real consequences, and he still does it every time. That's not reckless. That's conviction in an era where artists smooth out every edge to stay marketable. That level of conviction is rare. Look at how many artists sign deals and immediately change, cleaner image, safer music, polished interviews, the wrong disappears. That's the industry formula. Sign the deal, lose the edge, chase the crossover. Skrilla signed to Priority Records in 2023 and posted Animal Sacrifice on New Year's 2026. That's not the usual path. That's someone using the platform to amplify who he already is, not become what the industry might prefer, and that deserves recognition because that's artistic backbone, spiritual backbone, something most in the industry don't show. And here's what's really overlooked. Kids from places like Kensington are watching this, not the polished, a success story version, but the real one, the version that says you don't have to erase your roots, your beliefs, your culture to make it. That message hits different because most success stories demand assimilation, leaving parts of yourself behind. Skrilla is showing another way, whether people are ready for it or not. But he's already on to the next chapter. Think about the long-term impact 10 years from now when Afro-Latino artists openly bring their spiritual traditions into mainstream music. Skrilla will be one of the reasons that door opened. That's bigger than a viral moment, bigger than controversy. That's cultural impact, real, recognize, real, and Skrilla, he's real. Drop your thoughts. Do you think the backlash is genuine concern or just cultural ignorance? Let's talk about it, and if this puts you onto something new, share it with someone who needs to hear it.